The wrench slipped from Roy Fletcher's gloved hand and tumbled through empty space, spinning end over end until it disappeared into the darkness beyond Station 12's outer hull. He cursed quietly and reached for another tool from his belt. Fixing the solar panel array was supposed to be simple work, the kind that let his mind wander while his hands moved on autopilot. 3 years working maintenance on this forgotten refueling outpost had taught him that nothing ever stayed simple for long. The warning alarm cut through his helmet radio like a knife. Roy twisted around, magnetic boots keeping him anchored to the station's metal skin, and stared at the blinking red light on his wrist display. Unknown vessel approaching. No identification signal. No response to hails. He pushed off from the hull and activated his thruster pack, gliding back toward the airlock. Station 12 sat in the middle of nowhere, a tiny dot of human civilization perched on the edge of explored space. Ships came through maybe once a week, always with proper codes and clearances. An unidentified vessel meant trouble, and trouble meant paperwork Roy didn't want to deal with. The airlock cycled with painful slowness. Roy stripped off his suit and hurried to the command center, a cramped room filled with outdated monitors that flickered more than they displayed. The approaching ship looked like someone had taken a luxury yacht and put it through a trash compactor. Hull breaches leaked atmosphere and frozen plumes. The engines were dark. The entire vessel tumbled slowly, completely dead in space. Roy grabbed the communications mic. "Unknown vessel, this is Station 12. Do you require assistance?" Nothing but static answered him. He checked the scanner readings again. Life signs. Faint but definitely there. 3 of them, maybe 4. Getting weaker by the minute the decision made itself. Roy fired up the station's magnetic grapples, ancient mechanisms that groaned in protest but still worked. The damaged ship drifted into the emergency bay with agonizing slowness. Roy sealed the bay doors and started pressurization, watching the gauges climb while his heart hammered against his ribs. His medical training from the Unification Wars kicked in automatically. Assess, stabilize, treat. The mantra had saved lives back when Earth was tearing itself apart. Maybe it would work here too. The bay doors opened with a hiss. Roy ran inside, medical kit bouncing against his hip. The alien ship's hatch had been blown open from the inside. Emergency protocol, probably. He climbed through and immediately understood why they hadn't responded to his hails. 3 aliens lay collapsed on the deck, their pale blue skin covered in dark purple welts that spread like spilled ink. Their breathing came in shallow gasps. They were tall and thin, built like willow branches with 4 arms that ended in delicate fingers. Roy recognized them from the identification. Charts Earth's diplomatic corps had made everyone memorize. Halcyon, traitors, peaceful, no. Enemies that anyone knew about. Roy dropped to his knees beside the nearest one and pulled out his medical scanner. The device was designed for humans but could adapt to alien biology with mixed results. The readings made no sense at first, then suddenly made terrible sense. Poison. Something in their bloodstream that was shutting down their organs one by one. His scanner identified it as a synthetic compound, deliberately engineered. This wasn't an accident. The alien's eyes fluttered open, pale yellow with vertical pupils that struggled to focus. "Help," the word came out in broken English, barely a whisper. "Cannot stop it." Our medicine failed. Roy checked his medical kit. Standard human supplies, nothing designed for alien biology. Nothing that should work on a Halcyon's completely different biochemistry. He was a maintenance technician with expired medical certification, not a xenobiologist. He had no right to try anything. The alien's breathing stopped. Roy's hands moved before his brain caught up. He jammed a needle into his own arm and drew blood, then loaded it into a plasma separator from his kit. The device hummed, isolating the antibodies and proteins. Human immune systems were aggressive, overpowered, designed by evolution to fight off the thousands of diseases that made Earth such a hostile place. Maybe that aggression would work here. Maybe it would kill the alien faster. He had maybe 30 seconds to decide. He injected the human plasma into the alien's bloodstream and moved to the next one, then the third. His hands shook as he drew more of his own blood, processed it, injected it. The aliens convulsed once, twice. Then their breathing steadied. The purple welts began to fade at the edges, slowly at first, then faster. Roy sat back against the bulkhead and watched them breathe. His vision swam from blood loss and adrenaline crash. The alien he'd treated first opened her eyes again, clearer now, focused. She stared at him with an expression he couldn't read. You are Terran, she said, her voice stronger. Your kind is new, primitive. How did you save us? Roy laughed, a tired sound that echoed in the small ship. Primitive? Maybe, but we're really good at not dying. The alien sat up slowly, testing her limbs. The other two began to stir. She looked at Roy with something that might have been wonder or might have been fear. What you did should not have worked. Our physician said the poison was specifically designed to be undetectable and fatal to halcyon biology. Well, Roy said, I'm not a halcyon. And Earth taught humans that everything is trying to kill us, so we got pretty good at fighting back. The alien touched the spot where he'd injected the plasma. You gave us your own blood. Why would you risk yourself for strangers? Roy thought about the unification wars, about bleeding out in a field hospital while medics worked on enemy soldiers right next to him, about the moment when humanity decided that survival meant everyone or no one. Because you needed help, he said simply. Before the alien could respond, Roy's communication console beeped. He pulled himself to his feet and stumbled back toward the command center. A priority message from Earth's diplomatic corps filled the screen. It contained only 3 words followed by a long list of regulations and threats. Say nothing. Maintain silence. This incident is classified at the highest level. You will have no contact with the aliens beyond basic medical care. Roy deleted the message and walked back to the bay where the Halcyon were helping each other stand. The lead alien looked at him with those strange yellow eyes. I am Ambassador Trell, she said. You have saved the Halcyon delegation sent to negotiate new trade agreements. There are those in the galaxy who did not want these negotiations to succeed. They poisoned us and left us to die in space. She paused. You must come with us to the Concordant Assembly. You must testify about what happened here. Roy's scanner started beeping. New contacts on approach. Multiple ships. Moving fast, Ambassador Trell's face went pale. They have come to finish what they started. 5 ships emerged from the darkness like sharks circling wounded prey. Roy watched them on his monitors, their sleek hulls painted in the white and gold colors of Concordant peacekeepers. Everything about them looked official and legitimate. Everything except the way they moved, spreading out to surround Station 12 with the precision of a military blockade. Ambassador Trell stood beside him in the command center. Her forearms crossed in what he'd learned was a halcyon gesture of deep concern. Those are not peacekeepers, she said quietly. Those are Irdon collective vessels, mercenaries, the ones who poisoned us. Roy's fingers danced across the console, bringing up what passed for Station 12's defense systems. 2 outdated plasma turrets that probably couldn't hit a moon at point-blank range. A shield generator that worked on Tuesdays if he kicked it hard enough. Against 5 military vessels, he might as well throw rocks. The communication channel crackled to life. Station 12, this is Concordant Peacekeeping Vessel Justice. We received your distress signal regarding an alien vessel in need of assistance. Prepare to receive our inspection team. Roy had sent no distress signal. He glanced at Ambassador Trell, who shook her head slightly. Her 2 companions, Captain Oren and Dr. Yenna, had retreated deeper into the station when the ships appeared. Smart. Stay hidden until they knew what they were dealing with. Justice. This is Station 12, Roy responded, keeping his voice calm and bored. Appreciate the concern, but we've got everything under control here. False alarm. Sorry to waste your time. A pause. Then a different voice came through, deeper and rougher. Station 12, this is Warlord Brack, commander of this peacekeeping force. Our sensors indicate you have halcyon life signs aboard your station. They are material witnesses to a crime. You will surrender them to our custody immediately. Roy looked at Ambassador Trell. Her yellow eyes were wide with fear, but her voice stayed steady. If we go with them, they will kill us. They cannot allow us to testify about the poisoning. Then you're not going anywhere, Roy said. He leaned toward the microphone. Warlord Brack, I'm afraid I can't do that. These folks are under medical quarantine. Potential contagion risk. Regulations say I have to keep them isolated for 72 hours minimum. Another pause, longer this time. Roy used those seconds to pull up a schematic of the station on his personal tablet. The maintenance tunnels. He'd spent 3 years crawling through every pipe and conduit in this place. He knew passages that didn't show up on any official map. Spaces where the original builders had cut corners and left gaps in the sensor coverage. Station 12. Brack's voice had turned cold. You are interfering with concordant justice. Surrender the Halcyon or we will board your station by force. Yeah, see, that's going to be a problem, Roy said. He started typing commands into the station's environmental systems. Because if you try to board, I'm going to have to lock everything down. And trust me, you don't want to be wandering around Station 12 when I lock it down. This place was built by the lowest bidder 40 years ago. Life support gets wonky. Gravity shuts off in random sections. Last month I found a maintenance guy who'd, been stuck in an access tunnel for 3 days because the doors glitched. He was lying. Mostly. But the beauty of a rundown station was that nobody could prove what might malfunction. Brack didn't respond immediately. Roy used the silence to grab Ambassador Trell's arm. "Get your people," he whispered. "Maintenance Tunnel 7. Access panel behind the water recycler in the crew quarters. Move now." Trell hesitated only a moment, then ran. Her halcyon grace made her nearly silent despite her height. Roy turned back to his console and started implementing the worst idea he'd ever had. He dumped the station's entire waste recycling system into the air circulation, filling the upper decks with a smell that would make any boarding party think twice. He randomized the lighting controls, creating a strobe effect that would disorient intruders. He locked down every door except the path to Tunnel 7. Final warning, Station 12. Brack's voice carried a sharp edge now. "You have 60 seconds to surrender the Halcyon." Roy grabbed his toolkit and the medical supplies and ran. Behind him, he heard the distinctive sound of a ship docking with the station's airlock. Heavy magnetic clamps. Military grade. They were coming in whether he cooperated or not. He found the Halcyon waiting at the tunnel entrance, their tall frames folded awkwardly to fit through the narrow opening. Roy squeezed past them and led the way into darkness, relying on memory and the faint glow of emergency lighting strips. The tunnel was barely tall enough for him to crouch. The Halcyon had to crawl on their forearms, moving with surprising speed. Behind them, Roy heard shouts and the thunder of boots on metal decking. The Erdon had boarded. They were searching the station, tearing through his carefully organized chaos. He'd bought maybe 10 minutes, maybe less. The tunnel branched 3 times. Roy took them down paths that led away from the main station, toward the emergency pod bay. It was a long shot. The pods were designed for single-person evacuation, and they had 3 Halcyon to move. But it was the only way off the station that the Erdon might not immediately think to block. They emerged in the pod bay through a maintenance hatch in the floor. 6 evacuation pods sat in their launch tubes, ready for emergencies that everyone hoped would never come. Roy started programming the first pod's navigation system, setting a course for the nearest concordant assembly outpost. His fingers shook. The Erdon would be checking the pod bay any minute now. "Roy Fletcher." Ambassador Trell touched his shoulder with one delicate hand. "You are sacrificing yourself for us. Your species has no obligation to protect Halcyon. Why do you do this?" Roy didn't look up from the navigation screen. "Where I come from, we had a saying during the wars. Everyone gets home or nobody does." Seemed to work out okay. He sealed the first Halcyon into a pod and launched it before anyone could argue. The second and third followed within seconds. Ambassador Trell was the last, and she refused to enter her pod until Roy programmed his coordinates to follow them. "You will come with us," she insisted. "You must testify before the assembly about what happened here." "Can't," Roy said, pushing her gently into the pod. "Someone has to manually override the launch safeties from here. Station's automated systems are shot. It's why they haven't replaced me with a robot yet." He slammed the pod door shut and hit the launch button. The pod shot away from the station in a burst of compressed gas, joining the other 3 that were already accelerating toward safety. Roy turned around to find Warlord Brack standing in the pod bay entrance, surrounded by 6 armed Erdon soldiers. The Warlord was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with gray armored skin and eyes like chips of black ice. "That was very stupid," Brack said. Roy shrugged. "Yeah, well, stupid is kind of our thing." The cell was barely large enough to stand in, which Roy discovered when Warlord Brack's soldiers threw him inside and the gravity plating activated with a sudden lurch. He hit the floor hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Metal walls on all sides, one dim light panel above, no windows. Just him and his thoughts and the steady hum of ship engines that told him he was no longer on Station 12. 3 days passed before anyone came for him. 3 days of thin rations pushed through a slot in the door, of sleep interrupted by random gravity fluctuations that sent him floating toward the ceiling, of wondering if Ambassador Trell and the others had made it to safety. On the 4th day, the door opened and Brack filled the doorway like a mountain of armored flesh. "Walk," the Warlord commanded. Two guards grabbed Roy's arms and hauled him down corridors that all looked identical, past cells that held other prisoners who stared at him with alien eyes. Some curious, some afraid, none friendly. They emerged into what looked like a courtroom designed by someone who'd never heard of mercy. Tiered seating rose in a circle around a central platform where Roy was deposited like a piece of evidence. Hundreds of aliens filled those seats, representing species he couldn't name, all of them watching him with varying degrees of interest or hostility. Above it all, seated on a throne of black crystal, was a figure that made Warlord Brack look small. The Kartian Emperor. Roy had seen pictures in the diplomatic briefings, but pictures didn't capture the sheer wrongness of the creature. 10 feet tall with skin like volcanic rock, eyes that burned with inner fire and a mouth full of teeth designed for tearing meat. Human, the Emperor's voice boomed across the courtroom. You stand accused of interfering with concordant peacekeeping operations, harboring fugitives, and crimes against galactic order. How do you plead? Roy took a breath and let it out slowly. His ribs still ached from the beating Brack's soldiers had given him when they caught him trying to access the ship's communications array. He was pretty sure his left wrist was fractured. But pain was temporary. Fear was optional. Earth's wars had taught him that much. I plead not guilty, Roy said, and I'd like to point out that your peacekeepers poisoned 3 diplomatic ambassadors and tried to murder them. So maybe we should talk about who's really committing crimes here. The courtroom erupted. Aliens shouted in a dozen languages, their translation devices turning the chaos into a wall of sound that crashed over Roy from all sides. The Emperor raised one massive hand and silence fell like a hammer. You make bold accusations with no proof, the Emperor said. Actually, I have plenty of proof. Roy gestured toward the viewing screens mounted around the courtroom. Station 12 automatically records all medical procedures. I saved the Halcyon by using human plasma to neutralize a synthetic poison in their bloodstreams. That poison was specifically engineered to target Halcyon biology. Natural toxins don't work that way. Someone made that weapon and used it. A door opened on the opposite side of the courtroom. Ambassador Trell entered, flanked by Captain Oren and Dr. Yenna. Behind them walked beings that Roy recognized from the briefings. Viridians. Ancient observers who rarely involved themselves in galactic politics. Their presence here meant something significant was happening. The Halcyon delegation survived, Ambassador Trell announced, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. We survived because Roy Fletcher of Earth chose to help us despite having no obligation to do so. We survived because human biology, shaped by one of the harshest worlds in known space, proved resistant to weapons designed to kill without trace. She turned to face the Emperor directly. We survived and we bring evidence of who poisoned us. Evidence that points directly to the Kartian Empire. The courtroom exploded again. This time the Emperor couldn't silence them immediately. Roy watched alliances form and break in real time as different species shouted their positions. Some defended the Kartian. Some demanded investigation. Some called for humanity to be expelled from the galaxy entirely, for daring to interfere in affairs beyond their understanding. One of the Viridian observers stood. The simple gesture somehow cut through the noise better than any shout. The ancient being moved to the center of the courtroom, its crystalline form refracting light into rainbow patterns. I am Council Miras of the Viridian Collective. The being's voice sounded like wind through crystal chimes. We have observed this human's actions from the moment he saved the Halcyon delegation. We have also investigated the claims made here today. Council Miras turned toward the Emperor. The Halcyon speak truth. The poison was manufactured in Kartian laboratories. We have traced the supply chain. This is an outrage, the Emperor rose from his throne. The Viridians dare to accuse the Kartian Empire based on the word of a primitive deathworlder? Deathworlder? Roy interrupted. What's that supposed to mean? Council Miras turned to face him. It means, Roy Fletcher of Earth, that your homeworld is classified as a Class 12 hazard, one of the most hostile planets to produce sentient life in recorded galactic history. Your species evolved under conditions that would kill most beings gathered here within hours. Gravity twice what most consider comfortable, thousands of diseases constantly evolving, predators at every level of the food chain, weather that ranges from lethal heat to killing cold. Oh, Roy said. I mean, yeah. Earth can be rough, but that's just normal. No, Dr. Yenna spoke up from where she stood with the Halcyon. It is not normal. I have studied human biology extensively since you saved us. Your immune systems are overpowered by galactic standards. Your bones are dense enough to support gravity that would cripple most species. Your cardiovascular system can function in atmospheric conditions ranging from sea level to mountain peaks. You are, by every measure, built to survive conditions that would be considered extreme warfare environments for most civilizations. The courtroom had gone quiet again. Every alien was staring at Roy with new understanding. Some looked impressed. Some looked terrified. The Kartian Empire, Council Miras continued, has been developing biological weapons because they fear the galaxy is moving toward cooperation between species. They fear that if younger races learn to work together, the Kartian military dominance will end. And they especially fear humanity, because humans prove that beings from harsh worlds can choose mercy over conquest. Warlord Brack stepped forward. The human is dangerous. He should be eliminated before he contaminates the galaxy with his primitive ideals. The warlord's hand dropped toward the weapon at his hip. Roy tensed, but he had nowhere to run. The courtroom platform offered no cover. He was going to die here in front of hundreds of witnesses, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it. Council Miras moved faster than Roy would have thought possible. The Viridian stood between him and Brack, one crystalline hand raised. Ancient law protects those who give testimony before the assembly. Strike him and you violate the oldest laws of the Concordant. Brack's hand froze. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. This trial is suspended. Roy Fletcher will be held under Viridian protection, while the assembly debates humanity's future in the Concordant. 2 Viridian guards appeared and escorted Roy from the courtroom. Behind him, he heard the Emperor's voice rise above the renewed chaos. The assembly will vote within the cycle. Either humanity is expelled as too dangerous or we acknowledge them as equals. There is no middle path. Sanctuary looked nothing like Roy expected. After the harsh metal corridors of Brack's prison ship and the intimidating grandeur of the Kartian courtroom, the Viridian embassy world felt almost dreamlike. Gardens filled with plants from 1,000 worlds grew in impossible harmony. Buildings made of living crystal rose from the ground like trees, their surfaces shifting between transparent and opaque as needed. The air tasted sweet and clean. Roy sat on a bench beside a fountain that sang rather than splashed, watching water move in patterns that seemed to defy physics. Council Miras had left him here to think while the assembly debated humanity's fate. 3 days of debate so far. 3 days of representatives arguing whether humans were dangerous monsters or valuable allies. It is beautiful, is it not? A voice spoke behind him. Roy turned to find a young Viridian approaching. She was smaller than Council Miras, her crystalline form still showing the cloudiness of youth. I am Lyra. I study extinct and endangered civilizations. Your species has become my most recent subject of interest. Extinct? Roy raised an eyebrow. That's optimistic. Lyra settled onto the bench beside him, her body chiming softly with the movement. Forgive me. Poor word choice. I meant to say that I study species who stand at crucial moments in their development. Earth is such a species. She produced a data tablet that seemed to grow from her palm and handed it to Roy. Images filled the screen. Earth from space, human cities, historical footage of wars and disasters, and people helping each other in the aftermath. I have watched hundreds of hours of human history, Lyra said, and I have noticed something that troubles the Kartian Empire greatly. Your species has every reason to be violent conquerors. Earth made you strong enough to dominate most species in the galaxy. But instead of conquest, you choose cooperation. Instead of taking what you want by force, you negotiate and compromise. Why? Roy thought about the question while scrolling through images. He saw soldiers sharing rations with enemy prisoners during the Unification Wars. Saw volunteers digging through rubble after earthquakes. Saw scientists from competing nations working together on the first faster-than-light drive. Because we learned, he said finally, Earth was so busy trying to kill us that we figured out early on that working together was the only way to survive. We had to cooperate or die, simple as that. But that is precisely what makes you dangerous to the Kartian, Lyra said. They built their empire on the principle that strength means domination. That the strong take from the weak because that is the natural order. Then humans arrive and prove that strength can coexist with mercy, that the strong can choose to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Before Roy could respond, Dr. Yenna appeared on the path leading to the fountain. The halcyon doctor moved with purpose, her forearms carrying datapads and sample cases. Roy Fletcher, I need your help. What's wrong? Everything. Dr. Yenna set her equipment on a nearby table. While the assembly debates, a plague has broken out on Research Station Omega. 50 different species. 400 researchers, all dying from a pathogen that adapts to every treatment we attempt. We have lost 37 people in 2 days. Roy stood. And you think I can help because of the deathworlder thing? I think you can help because human immune systems are aggressive and adaptable in ways most species cannot match, Dr. Yenna said.
I have been analyzing your blood since you saved us.
The antibodies you produce are incredibly effective. If this plague is natural, your immune system might fight it off. If it is another Kartian weapon, you might survive long enough for me to develop a cure. Or I might die immediately, Roy said. Yes. Dr. Yenna didn't try to soften it. That is also possible. But 400 beings are definitely going to die if we do nothing. You are the only chance they have. Lyra stood quickly. Council Miras would forbid this. You are under Viridian protection. We cannot allow you to risk yourself, can't you? Roy looked at the young Viridian. You said yourself that humanity stands at a crucial moment. The Assembly is up there right now deciding if we're monsters or friends. What better way to prove we're friends than by risking my life to save aliens I've never met? Dr. Yenna's yellow eyes studied him carefully. You understand that I cannot guarantee your survival. I will do everything possible to keep you alive, but the plague is extremely aggressive. You may die in agony while I watch helplessly. Roy thought about Ambassador Trell and the other Halcyon dying in that damaged ship. Thought about how he'd made a choice in seconds that should have been impossible. Thought about all the soldiers he'd treated during the wars who died anyway despite his best efforts. Yeah, he said. I understand. Let's go. The journey to Research Station Omega took 6 hours by fast transport. Roy spent the time being examined by Dr. Yenna and her medical team. They took so many blood samples he started to feel lightheaded. They scanned every organ, mapped his genetic code, and ran him through simulations that predicted a 60% chance of death if he was exposed to the plague. The odds are not good, Dr. Yenna said, as they approached the quarantine zone. Are you certain you want to proceed? Roy looked out the viewport at the research station. It looked peaceful from the outside, a spinning wheel of metal and glass against the stars. But inside, hundreds of beings were dying, and their own advanced medicine couldn't save them. Meanwhile, he was just a maintenance worker from a backwater planet who happened to have an overactive immune system. My grandmother used to say that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing, Roy said. She was quoting somebody, but I never learned who. Point is, I can do something, so I'm going to. They docked with the station through an isolation airlock. The decontamination procedures took another hour. Then Roy was standing in the station's medical bay, surrounded by patients from species he couldn't name, all of them covered in lesions and struggling to breathe. Dr. Yenna handed him a breather mask. This will filter the air but not protect you from the pathogen if it is bloodborne or contact transmitted. Once you enter the contaminated section, there is no going back. Your body will either fight off the infection or it will not. Roy took the mask and headed for the isolation door. Behind him, Dr. Yenna and her team watched through the observation window, their instruments ready to record whatever happened next. The door opened. Roy walked through. Within seconds, his skin started to itch. Within minutes, his temperature began to climb. Within an hour, he collapsed, and Dr. Yenna's team rushed in wearing full hazard suits to drag him to the emergency treatment area. But by then, his blood was already full of antibodies targeting the plague. And Dr. Yenna was already synthesizing a cure. The galaxy watched and waited to see if the deathworlder would survive. Pain was an old friend by now. Roy had learned its language during the wars, understood its rhythms and meanings. This pain spoke of fever and infection, of his body waging war against an invader it had never encountered before. He floated in and out of consciousness, aware of voices around him speaking in urgent tones, aware of needles and monitors and the steady beep of machines tracking whether he would live or die. When his eyes finally opened and stayed open, Dr. Yenna was standing over him with an expression he'd learned to read as halcyon relief. You survived, she said simply. Against considerable odds, your immune system adapted to the plague and destroyed it. We have been synthesizing your antibodies for the past 18 hours. 263 patients have received treatment. All of them are recovering. Roy tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His muscles felt like they'd been replaced with broken glass. How long was I out? 4 days. You were clinically dead twice. We had to restart your heart using electrical stimulation. Dr. Yenna helped him sit up slowly, adjusting the bed to support his weight. Human biology is remarkable. Most species would not have survived the initial exposure. None would have recovered without extensive medical intervention. You simply refused to die. Through the observation window, Roy could see the medical bay filling with aliens from dozens of species. Some were helping others walk. Some were embracing in relief. All of them were alive when they should have been corpses. The plague. Roy's throat felt raw. Was it natural? No. Dr. Yenna's voice turned cold. It was engineered by Kartian Biological Weapons Division. We found the genetic markers. They released it here to eliminate researchers who were developing cures for diseases affecting multiple species. The Kartian wanted to ensure they remained the only source of advanced medicine, giving them leverage over other worlds. A door opened and Lyra rushed in, her crystalline form chiming with agitation. Roy Fletcher, you must see this. The entire galaxy is watching what happened here. She activated a holographic display that filled the air above Roy's bed. News broadcasts from 100 worlds, all showing footage of him entering the contaminated zone. Interviews with the survivors he'd saved. Ambassador Trell speaking before the Concordant Assembly, her voice passionate as she argued for humanity's acceptance. And everywhere the same question being asked in 1,000 languages. If one human could save hundreds with no thought for his own safety, what could humanity accomplish if given the chance? Public opinion has shifted, Lyra explained. When you were on trial, 60% of the galaxy wanted humanity expelled or quarantined. Now 70% support full membership in the Concordant. You have become a symbol. Great, Roy muttered. All I wanted was to fix solar panels and drink coffee in peace. The holographic display shifted to show a live feed from the assembly chambers. The Kartian Emperor stood at the center, his volcanic skin glowing with rage. This proves nothing. The human got lucky. One act of foolish heroism does not erase the danger his species represents. Then the display showed something that made Roy's blood run cold. Ships, hundreds of them, bearing Kartian military markings, moving toward the research station. At the head of the fleet was Warlord Brack's flagship. They are coming to destroy the evidence, Dr. Yenna said quietly, and to kill everyone aboard this station. Roy forced himself to his feet, ignoring the protests from his body and Dr. Yenna's attempts to push him back into bed. We need to evacuate. How many ships does the station have? None capable of carrying 400 people, Lyra said. The research vessels are small, designed for short-range trips, and the Kartian fleet will arrive in less than an hour. Roy stumbled to the observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Ambassador Trell was arguing for humanity's right to exist as equals in the galaxy. Somewhere out there, the Concordant Assembly was debating and voting, while the Kartian prepared to commit mass murder to silence the truth. Send a message, Roy said. Broadcast to every ship within range. Tell them what's happening here. Tell them the Kartian are about to destroy a research station full of civilians to cover up their crimes. And if no one comes? Dr. Yenna asked. Then we make it expensive. Roy headed for the door, each step sending pain shooting through his legs. This station has to have some kind of defense systems, and I'm really good at making broken things work. The next 40 minutes were chaos. Roy raided the station's supply depot for anything that could be weaponized. He reprogrammed maintenance drones to carry explosive charges. He rigged the station's communication array to emit a signal that would jam targeting systems. He convinced 36 researchers from species that had never seen combat to help him turn their peaceful research station into something that could at least shoot back. When the Kartian fleet arrived, they found a station that refused to roll over and die. Roy's improvised defenses destroyed 2 attack ships before Warlord Brack's flagship moved into firing position. The Warlord's face appeared on every screen in the station, massive and terrible. Surrender now and I will make your deaths quick, Brack said. Counter-offer, Roy replied. Leave now and you might survive what happens next. What happens next? Brack laughed. You have no fleet. No weapons. No hope, yeah, Roy said. But we do have friends. Ships began dropping out of faster-than-light travel around the station. Not concordant peacekeepers, not official military vessels. Just civilian ships from 50 different species. Captains and crews who had heard the broadcast and decided that they couldn't stand by while the Kartian committed murder. A Halcyon trade vessel took position beside the station. then a Viridian science ship, then a mining barge crewed by beings whose species Roy didn't recognize, then more and more, until the station was surrounded by a makeshift fleet of ships that had no business fighting, but were there anyway. Ambassador Trell's voice came through the communication channel. Warlord Brack, you face not just humans now. You face the will of the free galaxy. We are here because Roy Fletcher proved that the strong can protect the weak. We are here because we choose to stand together. Brack's flagship charged weapons. For a moment that stretched like eternity. Roy was certain they were all going to die. Then ships began appearing behind the civilian fleet. Real warships this time, bearing the marks of the Concordant Assembly's military forces. Council Miras's voice cut through the tension like a bell. Warlord Brack, the Assembly has voted. Humanity is granted full membership and protector species status. The Kartian Empire is hereby charged with crimes against galactic peace. You are ordered to stand down immediately. Brack's response was to open fire on the nearest civilian ship. But before his weapons could connect, the Concordant warships returned fire. The flagship's shields collapsed. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull. Roy watched through the observation window as Warlord Brack's ship broke apart, scattering debris into the void. The rest of the Kartian fleet retreated into faster-than-light travel, abandoning their commander. The galaxy had spoken. Humanity would not stand alone. 6 months felt like 6 years. Roy stood in the assembly chambers wearing a uniform he never thought he'd need. The simple gray and blue of Earth's diplomatic corps with one addition. A patch showing a human hand extended toward reaching alien appendages. The symbol of the Galactic Health Corps, humanity's contribution to the Concordant Assembly. His contribution, though he still couldn't quite believe it. The chambers were packed. Every seat filled with representatives from species Roy had barely heard of 6 months ago. Some he'd saved personally at Research Station Omega. Some had sent ships to defend the station when Warlord Brack attacked. All of them were here for the vote that would determine not just humanity's future, but the future of the entire Concordant Assembly. Ambassador Trell stood at the center podium, her forearms gesturing as she spoke. The evidence is clear. The Kartian Empire has deployed biological weapons on 12 worlds. They have killed thousands in their attempt to maintain power through fear. But they have failed, because one human showed us a different path. Roy Fletcher proved that strength without compassion is merely brutality. That survival depends not on dominating others, but on protecting them. The Kartian section of the chamber sat empty except for one figure, not the Emperor who'd tried to have Roy executed, not Warlord Brack who'd died attacking the research station. Instead, a young Kartian diplomat named Voss sat alone, representing a faction of his species that had broken away from the Empire's rule. The old Kartian Empire is finished. Voss's voice was quiet but carried through the chamber. Those of us who remain acknowledge our crimes. We ask not for forgiveness but for the chance to prove we can change. The human showed mercy even to Warlord Brack as he lay dying in his ship's wreckage. If a deathworlder can choose peace after everything we did to him, surely we can learn to do the same. A murmur ran through the chamber. Dr. Yenna stood from the Halcyon delegation and moved to the podium. I have spent 6 months studying human biology and human culture. What I learned changes everything we thought we knew about survival. Humans evolved on a world that should have killed them. Earth has gravity that strains their bodies, diseases that attack them constantly, predators that hunt them, and weather that ranges from deadly heat to killing cold. By all logic, humans should have evolved to be solitary, aggressive, and paranoid. She paused and looked directly at Roy. Instead, they became the most cooperative species we have ever encountered. They learned that helping each other was the only way to survive their brutal world. They developed empathy not as weakness but as their greatest strength. And now they offer to share that strength with all of us. Council Miras rose from the Viridian section. The ancient being's crystalline form caught the light and scattered it across the chamber like stars. The Viridians have observed 10,000 civilizations rise and fall. We have seen species that conquered through force, species that dominated through technology, species that ruled through fear. All of them eventually destroyed themselves or became so rigid they stopped growing. Humanity is different. They combine deathworlder resilience with genuine compassion. They represent something the galaxy desperately needs. Proof that the strong can choose to lift others up instead of pushing them down. The time for debate ended. The vote began. Roy watched the display above the chamber as each species cast their decision. Green for acceptance, red for rejection, yellow for abstention. The colors flickered and shifted as hundreds of representatives made their choice. Green dominated the board, 78% in favor. Humanity would remain in the concordant assembly with full rights and privileges. More than that, humans would be recognized as a protector species, dedicated to defending others and sharing their knowledge freely. The chamber erupted in celebration. Ambassador Trell rushed to embrace Roy, her forearms wrapping around him with surprising gentleness. Lyra appeared beside them, her crystalline form chiming with joy. Even Dr. Yenna showed emotion, her normally composed expression cracking into something that might have been a smile. But Roy's attention was on the holographic display showing real-time news from across the galaxy. The Galactic Health Corps had already established treatment centers on 50 worlds, staffed by human volunteers working alongside alien doctors. Diseases that had killed for generations were being cured using human antibodies and research techniques. Species that had barely spoken to each other were now collaborating on medical projects, learning from Earth's example. A transmission came through on Roy's personal communicator. He stepped away from the celebration to answer it. The face that appeared was familiar, the director of Earth's diplomatic corps, the same person who'd ordered him to say nothing about saving the Halcyon all those months ago. "Mr. Fletcher," the director said, "I owe you an apology. We thought humanity needed to move slowly, to avoid drawing attention. You proved that sometimes the right thing to do is also the bold thing. Earth is proud of what you've accomplished." "I didn't accomplish anything," Roy said. "I just helped some people who needed help. That's exactly what makes you perfect for this position." The director's expression turned serious. "We need you to lead the Galactic Health Corps, to train others, both human and alien, in how to respond to medical crises across the galaxy. It won't be easy. There will be resistance, danger, and probably more assassination attempts from species that don't want change." Roy thought about Station 12, about the quiet life he'd left behind fixing solar panels and drinking coffee in peace. He thought about Ambassador Trell dying from poison, about the researchers at Station Omega gasping for breath, about Warlord Brack who died still not understanding why anyone would risk themselves for strangers. "I'll do it," he said. 5 years later, Roy stood on Station 12 again. The old refueling outpost had been transformed into a training facility where volunteers from 80 species learned deathworlder survival skills and emergency medicine. The solar panels he'd once fixed alone were now maintained by mixed teams of humans and aliens working together, sharing techniques and teaching each other. Lyra had become an instructor, teaching galactic history with a focus on cooperation rather than conquest. Dr. Yenna ran the medical program, combining Halcyon precision with human adaptability. Ambassador Trell served as liaison to the assembly, ensuring the Health Corps had resources and support. Even young Voss had joined, representing the new Kartian generation determined to atone for their empire's crimes. Roy's communicator beeped. A message from an unknown region of space, a species humanity had never contacted before. They were asking for help with a plague that was killing their population. The message was desperate, afraid, hopeful. Roy smiled and typed his response. 4 simple words that had become the Health Corps motto. "We are on our way." He looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy full of species learning to work together, and thought about his grandmother's quote. Evil had not triumphed. Good people had done something, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the training bay below, a new batch of recruits gathered for orientation. Humans stood beside Halcyon. Viridians worked with former Kartian, and dozens of other species mixed together in ways that would have been impossible a few years ago. They were learning that survival meant cooperation, that strength meant protecting the weak, that the greatest power came not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. Roy headed down to meet the new recruits, ready to teach them what Earth had taught humanity through countless disasters and wars and plagues. Everyone gets home, or nobody does. And out in the darkness between stars, the galaxy watched humanity and learned that deathworlders could choose to be healers instead of conquerors, that compassion was not weakness but the ultimate strength, and that sometimes the most important thing any being could do was simply help someone who needed it. The ultimate galactic adventure had only just begun.